Okay, now we're going to welcome our second speaker from Poland, Sylvia Roszkowska. I hope I pronounced that right. Masters in Economics and Masters in Econometrics from University of LODZ, PhD in Economics from University of LODZ, has received different recognitions for her published work, such as Best Paper Awards and Rector's Awards for co-authorship of a book. Currently works for LODZ University in the Macroeconomics Department of the Faculty of Economics and Sociology. Please welcome Sylvia Roszkowska.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for invitation here. It's really pleasure to be here and to give you presentation on convergence. So the topic of my presentation is heterogeneity in convergence patterns in CE countries, and in fact I'm going to say also about more than CE countries, also about other transition countries. This is joint work with my co-author, Mateusz Pipien from Krakow University in Poland. Okay. So, the plan of my presentation is quite standard. I start with motivation, later say a few words about theoretical background, later show you model data, show you some basic empirical analysis, and shortly conclude. So what is the motivation? What is the main aim? The main aim is to check if the convergence theory works in transition economies. I take into account only those European. And also I am interested if there are convergence space differences. So, moving to theoretical background, we should focus on neoclassical growth models and other models, extended growth models proposed by Monkey-Romer-Weil, and other models connected with endogenous growth, the model proposed in Ramsey in early 20s. So, and the basic matter in this kind of model is neoclassical production function, where Y is a GDP, so Y is a production, F is for function, A is for technology, and we have kind of inputs like labor, capital, human capital, and natural resources. In this kind of function, we usually take into account only two inputs, capital and labor, because of data accessibility. And we assume that this kind of function is positive and diminishing marginal product. We have constant returns to scale, and this function fulfills another condition. So, what does it mean, constant returns to scale? If you are not familiar, it means that changing all inputs by same percentage cause output to change by the percentage. So if we multiply our inputs by 2, then our output double. So we can multiply by 1 divided by L, and then output is multiplied, and we can get the productivity function. So also the important feature of this function are diminishing returns to capital. What does it mean, diminishing returns? It means that when K will rise, then productivity rise, but every capital rise results in extra output falls. So these are our production function graphical presentation. So on the axis we have capital per worker. On the other one we have productivity. So this is output per worker or GDP per worker. And production function looks like that. So this function fulfills diminishing returns. And what is about catching up effect? So this is the property when poor countries tend to grow rapidly than rich ones. So poor country is the country with low capital per worker level, and this country starts near to zero, let's say, and rich country starts with higher capital per worker. So when we increase capital per worker, then growth in poor country will be higher, much more higher than in the rich one. So, and this production function is mainly used in neoclassical growth theory. Modern version of this theory was introduced by Robert Solow, who was also Nobel Prize winner, and the main assumption is neoclassical production function. And what is about that theory is about? So this theory says that we have steady state. Steady state means that capital sorry. Okay. So it means that growth rate of capital per workers is zero. This is the steady state definition. This implies the steady state result. This is the last line. And according to this theory, we can graph it. So E is equilibrium or steady state. And having this kind of theory, we can talk about convergence, about absolute convergence hypothesis. According to this hypothesis, we assume that all economies are the same except for the starting capital per worker value. So poor countries would tend to grow faster than richer ones. And also other popular hypothesis about convergence is conditional convergence. So in this hypothesis, we allow for differences between countries. So countries have different steady state values because of different propensities to saving, because a different propensity to having children, to willingness to work, access to technology and government policies. So the convergence is conditional in that sense that steady state depends on different variables, macroeconomic variables. So according to thank you. So according to this conditional convergence hypothesis, the growth rate will be higher if the starting point is lower. So it means that in case of poor countries with low steady state position, the growth rate of GDP would be also low. So in fact, according to this hypothesis, it means that it does not mean that countries can get higher growth rate of GDP because of convergence. So the formal model in this case is, as you can see, so on the left-hand side we have GDP per worker growth rate, so G, and on the left-hand side we have initial level of GDP per worker and steady state value of GDP per worker. So this is graphical interpretation also, so just to give you some intuition. So in fact, GDP per worker growth rate is diminishing in initial level of GDP for given steady state value, and also is rising in steady state value for given value of initial GDP. So steady state level of per capita depends on variety of measures. These are private sector choices, also choices of government, and also external conditions given to the economy. So these are variables which I'm going to take into account in my empirical analysis. So we have some kind of heterogeneity in transition countries, those in European Union. So those countries which I'm going to talk about, these are 8 Central Eastern European countries, CEE countries. These are Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia and Slovenia, and also 12 Commonwealth of Independent States countries. These are Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Moldova, Russia, Turkey, Turkmenistan, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan. And when we look at the data about these countries, so these are initial GDP per worker in 1999. These are American dollars, PPP, constant prices, and the relation of labor productivity between those 2 years, then one can see that capital per worker is much higher in countries from CE group, and in fact we are not able to find any pattern in labor productivity growth rates on this picture. So, because we have some data and we have some problem, we can use some kind of econometric tools to find what's going on. So, what I did was estimation of parameters of this equation. On the left-hand side, we have the first difference of log labor productivity. So, in fact, this is labor productivity growth rate on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side we have parameters. These are alpha, beta also is a parameter. We have initial level of GDP per worker, and also the vector of or the set of additional explanatory variables which determine productivity in equilibrium, which cover in fact steady state value. So our X are GDP to, these are government consumption expenditure to GDP. These are inflation rate. We allow for non-linearity, so inflation is square. Investment rate, defined as gross fixed capital formation to GDP. Also, we had to take into account trend component because of many institutional changes and unobservable changes, and also a growing role of education. And the most important parameter interpretable here is beta, and beta is the rate of convergence, in fact. So we estimate these parameters of these equations using data starting in 1992 to 2015. We have 2 groups of countries. We use seemingly unrelated regression equations system and Zellner estimator to allow for variability of parameters across countries. And in fact, in our research, each equation in our system is a growth equation built for a particular country. So in fact, what we did, we estimate equation by equation just to get differentiate beta parameter, and just to get also the possibility to test some kind of hypothesis, so to get some common unrestricted variance covariance matrix. We use data from United Nations database, very, very known. So, what are estimated beta parameters in a group of Central European countries? So first of all, these point estimates of convergence parameters are negative, which means there is a convergence. There's one exception. These are Czech Republic, because 0 is in our interval, in our confidence interval. Then it means that there's no convergence, conditional convergence in Czech Republic. So this is the first look, and also these parameters, as I said, are negative, or almost all are negative. I mean, all are negative, and exception other. The second exception is Slovenia. In Slovenia, the estimated convergence parameter is almost 2 times higher than in other countries, which means that in this period, convergence had 2 times faster convergence than others. What's more, we can also formally check if these parameters, I mean, if these dots are equals. So we use some kind of testing hypothesis schedule to do it. So on this table you can see the pairwise comparison of estimates of convergence in C countries. So the question or hypothesis is here, do convergence parameters differ? So in many cases we have no evidence that they differ. So they are the same. Exception is Slovenia, and as one can find earlier, Czech. So we can confirm it statistically. And also this same exercise was prepared for group of Commonwealth of Independent States countries, so CIS countries, and in this group of countries we can report very different point estimates of convergence parameters and substantially different spread of confidence intervals. And also we can see that there is no convergence because confidence intervals cover 0 in case of Armenia, in case of Belarus, and in case of Tajikistan. And also this kind of testing procedures was prepared also for this group. And in case of this group, in many cases we can rather find evidence. So if there are dots, it means that parameters differ. So there is no common pattern of convergence in case of this group of countries, these CIS countries. And just quickly to sum up, so the first point is that conditional convergence takes place in many transition C and CIS countries, so in many European countries. The analysis provided in our paper are based on data set which cover from 1992 to 2005, and results obtained for our samples show that estimated convergence space are localized to close to 0.25, and exception are Slovenia and Czech Republic also somehow. And what's more, the group of Central European countries is relatively homogeneous. And also, when we prepared same kind of exercise for CIS countries, then it occurs that there is huge heterogeneity in convergence space across set of countries, CIS countries, and generally we are able to confirm this heterogeneity using statistical tools. And in fact, there are no similar patterns of convergence among these countries. So it seems, because still we don't know, but it seems that these differences in convergence patterns between those groups of countries can be explained somehow by level of reforms, by production structure, by institutional changes, and also by jobless growth and economic freedom indicators. That's all. Thank you for your attention.
Are there any questions for our speaker? Jolene?
Thank you. Thanks, Sylvia, for your presentation. It was pretty interesting. Yes, I got a question regarding the variables, because you've mentioned, which I found very interesting, you mentioned that you have the private field, you also do have the government, and then you also have the free forces of the economy by itself. And also here you show that you have a relationship between the government expenditure, right, in this one. So I just would like to know, according to your appreciation, if there is a very sensitive point in this, because as you know, I was trying, while you were talking, I was trying to put this analysis into our country, which might be similar to the CEE, I think. Yes, right? Yes. So which is the most sensitive part, if you have one, part of this equation? Because it might be the private investment, it might be the government intervention, or it might be the economy by itself. So according to your appreciation, which one would be? It means that if one is moved up or down, it will change completely the result of convergence.
Thank you for your question. I think, I'm not sure now, and I don't remember in fact, but I think that investment rate, yeah. Because these are changing. I mean, in those countries, in all those countries, government to GDP is quite stable. It's like from 15 to 25%. Inflation, it depends, because in previous Soviet countries there were some problems in early 90s, and I think, and I'm almost sure that investment here, because in fact I use yearly data. So as you know, investment change a lot in this kind of data, so you can smooth. So we can also smooth, but yeah.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to take a short break. Before, let's give Sylvia a round of applause.